We recognize that the Hogan Administrative Center occupies the land of the Ho-Chunk people. Please take a moment to celebrate and honor this ancestral Ho-Chunk land and the sacred lands of all Indigenous peoples. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Baumann?
Here.
Ms. Berkedal?
Here.
Dr. Garcia?
Here.
Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Dr. Jimenez?
Excused.
Mr. Newmeister?
Excused.
Mr. Korberg?
Here.
Dr. Sprague?
Here.
Ms. Sukla?
Here.
A quorum of the Board of Education is present, so the regularly scheduled meeting of October 2nd, 2023 is called to order. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and face the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Tonight's agenda has previously been distributed to the board with a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Garcia. We will approve the agenda as submitted unless there is a motion to amend. Hearing none, we'll do a quick vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right, so we're going to move into our school showcase tonight. We'll hear from Ms. Britta Rodering on the transcripted credit presentation, or excuse me, the transcripted credit program. Thanks, Britta.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to participate in the showcase this evening. I am here to talk about our transcripted credit program, which is a dual credit opportunity offered within the school district of La Crosse. And I'm thrilled tonight to have this amazing group of teachers and students joining us. So you will not only hear from myself, but them as well. I'd like to start with an overview of transcripted credit. This is a program, as I mentioned, that is dual credit attaining for students in our district. Transcripted credit courses are taught by a high school teacher who meets the Higher Learning Commission. They also have the oversight of the Wisconsin Technical College system. Once they have been approved and gone through a process and a transcripted credit agreement, what happens is the teacher teaches the course to course, from our high school course to the WTCS course. The student receives high school and post-secondary credit simultaneously. Students may take those credits with them after they graduate. Those credits can go along with the student even if they are not staying within the Wisconsin Technical College system. They could transfer with them into truly any post-secondary institution, and we work with our teachers and our students to seek advocacy for credit for that prior learning experience. Another great aspect of transcripted credit is that there is no cost to our students, no cost to the district, and no vetting or required prerequisites for a student to be able to participate in the course. So every student gets a seat at the transcripted credit table. Now, sometimes a high school student may not meet the requirements of the course. Previously, it was known as an 80%. And so what happens when a student doesn't meet the requirements, they still, of course, earn their high school credit, but the post-secondary transcript is scrubbed. And so there is no withdrawal unsatisfactory. Essentially, there's not a dirty transcript. It acts like it didn't happen, which is wonderful because, of course, these are high school students who are taking a chance, seeking to earn, as I mentioned, not only our credit, but the post-secondary credit as well. The next slide in my program highlights what a strong pathway includes. And so a strong pathway has 5 elements, and the 5 elements of a strong career pathway include a stack of courses, an industry-recognized credential, a work-based learning opportunity, which could be a youth apprenticeship or a cooperative internship, an opportunity for a student to participate in a related career and technical student organization, and an opportunity for a student to earn dual credit. And so I had mentioned this previously when I had an opportunity to present to this board, but my number one goal in this district is to create 16 robust career pathways for our students and families that offer all 5 of these opportunities within each. And we are well on our way within the district. So a celebration from 22-23 school year is that we had 786 students earn transcripted credit last year. The number 786 to me is absolutely outstanding, and that comes with a significant amount of growth throughout the 22-23 school year. So if we take a peek at Logan High School, from 21-22 to 22-23, we had an increase of 48% in transcripted credit. If we look at Central High School, there was an increase in the same time frame by 29%. So if we look at what that cost savings was for students in our district from Central High School for 22-23, it was over $295,000. From Logan High School, it was over $153,000. I think these numbers are amazing. They're encouraging. I can tell you that I hope to come back next year and provide you with this and even more, because we continue to expand our opportunities, but this would not be possible without the teachers on our team that we have. Within our career and technical education team, I have 32 teachers. 23 of those are high school teachers, and 22 of those 23 high school teachers are teaching for transcripted credit. And so they are answering the call, doing the extra work, continuing to further their education, taking on all the extra requirements that we ask, and oftentimes doing it with a smile, because they know that providing opportunities for our students are absolutely what is number one for us in the school district of La Crosse. So with that, I would like to start with our business and marketing department, and we have a list of courses that we are offering. And then, so as our teachers come up, actually I'm going to call all of you up, CTE team and teachers, if you could come on up. And I apologize for having them step in front of you. And as you get to your department, feel free to highlight your courses, please.
Hi, my name is Jamie Houchins. I'm at Logan High School. I am the business ed teacher, and I teach personal finance, intro to business, and sports and entertainment and marketing, intro to marketing, as well as advanced marketing. So for personal finance, we have it transcripted with personal investing, personal money management, and personal insurance, tax, and estate planning. Intro to business is transcripted to intro to business. And accounting 2 is transcripted to accounting 1. Computer applications is transcripted to software applications for business. Intro to marketing is with marketing principles. Sports and entertainment marketing is with selling principles, and advanced marketing and quality customer service. I am very happy to be doing that this year, and very excited as we've already started some projects with a couple of those classes, and the kids are well involved into the branding, and so I'm pretty excited.
Wonderful. Actually, the next one I'm going to go ahead and grab. This is Family Consumer Sciences Education. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have an instructor join us tonight. We have Child Development, which is transcripted for Infant and Toddler Development. Assistant Child Care Teacher, which is transcripted with a course called Child Development. Housing and Interior Design with Principles of Design. Advanced Foods or Culinary with Culinary Fundamentals. World Cuisine with Dining Room Theory. And new last year, Foundations of Education, which is transcripted with Intro to Education. And could I have Ms. Boyd?
Hello. So I'm Jen Voigt. I'm one of the 3 instructors for the Health Science Academy. And we're super excited. We have Health Occupations 2, which is not new. That's been a transcripted course for quite a while, I believe. Nami George is our instructor for that. Medical terminology is paired with medical terminology. And then exploring health careers and the culture of healthcare. And it's exciting to be part of this because you know how this is impacting our students in a positive way. I'm excited to maybe have a conversation about finding an avenue for an anatomy and physiology partnership, because our students do take 3 semesters worth of human anatomy and physiology, and I do believe we should be able to find a connection there. So it's exciting, and I hoped to have some students here tonight, but you know how busy they all are, and it's great that some of you came. I'd love to see that. But I know one of the things the students talked about as a benefit for midterm is that they know that At the college level, MedTerm is usually fully online, and they really understand the benefit of being able to check in with me personally and get help in that way, because it's a lot. And so that's just one little piece. Another advantage of having that opportunity is that direct connection with instructors. So.
Hello everyone, my name is Brooks Luke. I am the new agricultural teacher for the school district of La Crosse, and we are looking to start transcripting classes. We're going to start with my animal care class that I offer, transcripting with Western Tech with their Intro to Animal Science, and hopefully to build into the future to transcript more courses as we build the program. Just being in its first year, I have 2 courses, so right now I will be transcripting at about 50%. So I have a lot of students that are very excited. Lots of hands-on opportunities, and I'm very excited to grow this program with the school district.
Good evening, I'm Doug Dahman. This is my 25th year in the school district of La Crosse as a technology and engineering teacher at Central High School. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come up here and talk about an important part of our program with transcripted credit. Our courses, small engine welding and fabrication. Small engine welding and fabrication transfers to WTC as welding transportation, which is a course that is used in several different programs down there, and then also oxy-fuel acetylene cutting. Building construction transfers down to construction industry basics. Intro to automotive transfers to introduction to auto technology. Cisco networking transfers to Cisco One and networking fundamentals. Photography and video production transfers to Adobe Photoshop. Industrial control PLCs and robotics transfers to WTC as Introduction Industrial Robots. Engineering processes transfers to WTC as Introduction to Electromechanical Technology. And building information management will transfer down to AutoCAD Level 1. And we always are looking for more courses to add, like we're currently working with our IED and our POE classes, Introduction to Engineering Design and Principles of Engineering course, to transcript to WTC as a parametric modeling course. So, and I also brought along 3 students with me, David, Neil, and Garrett. If you guys want to come up here a little bit. I kind of wanted a chance to go through like a typical student schedule to show you the impact it has. So for David and Neil, they have a pretty similar schedule. With small engine welding and fabrications, 1 course with me, transcripts down to WTC as welding transportation and oxy-fuel acetylene cutting, and that's 3 credits they earn for that at WTC. Woods 3 transfers down to WTC as fundamentals of woodworking, which also transfers as 2 credits to WTC. In our architecture, construction, and engineering 2-year academy, they take construction systems with us as a junior. That transfers to WTC as Framing 1 for 2 credits, and Building Information Management, which they're both currently in, that transfers down to WTC as AutoCAD 1 for 2 credits. And then they've both taken Personal Finance, which transfers down as 3 credits, so a total between David and Neil, each will earn 12 credits before they graduate Central High School to move on to a post-secondary education that they can take with them. Garrett's the other young man we brought with. Garrett, again, also took small engine welding fabrication 1, which again transfers down to welding transportation and oxy-fuel acetylene cutting for 3 credits. He's in our engineering academy, which is housed down at WTC. And Garrett down there has taken industrial robotics and PLCs, which transfers to industrial robotics for 2 credits. Engineering processes with us, which transfers down to mechatronics for 2 credits. Engineering design capstone with us, which transfers to WTC as rapid prototyping for 2 credits. Cisco Networking Academy, he'll have the chance to earn that this year, which transfers down at networking fundamentals for 3 credits. And then also along with personal finance for 3 credits, Garrett will walk away from Central High School with 15 post-secondary education credits. So pretty amazing opportunity for our kids. So thank you. You guys, I said these guys would have to come up and introduce themselves and tell everybody what they're going to school for too. So if you guys want to come up.
Hi, my name's Neil Kleinertz, and I think as of right now I'm going to head to Platteville for college. So I'm going to go down there with 12 credits. So I can use those, either they transfer directly or go as my elective credits. So it'll help save me money, and I get a head start compared to other people that have not had this opportunity, so helps a lot.
All right. My name's Garrett. I'm a senior. I'm going to, I think, Iowa State for mechanical engineering, and these transcripted credits will really help me moving into my career.
So I'm David. I'm also a senior there at Central. So my plan is to either go to UW-Platteville or UW-Madison and study construction management or some type of engineering program. So with those 10 to 12 credits, I can transfer them to either one of those two schools and even get a head start to some people. And again, what Mr. Dowland brought up, or her, it's cost-free, so this makes it a lot easier for me and my family in the future. Thank you.
I'll introduce myself real quick. I'm a tech ed teacher at Logan, so we offer the same courses. Andrew Scott.
And we have one more student, Jack, last but not least. Come on up.
Hello, my name's Jack Murphy. I graduated last spring from Central High School in the class of 23, and I was part of the youth apprenticeship program for my senior year in high school. Doing that youth apprenticeship program, I got a job at Western Tech working campus safety for them. I'm currently enrolled at Western Tech for their criminal justice class. Hope to be a cop in the future. And this was able to give me a head start, kind of learn more about the career. I also took some of Mr. Dahman's classes in high school, and they were really, really informative, helped me with my everyday life, even though that might not be my major. But yeah, I really enjoyed that program last year and learned a lot from it. So.
Jack, real quick, how many credits did we talk that you brought with you?
I got 9 credits in high school. I took sports and entertainment marketing along with small engines. So.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. If there's any questions or anything that we can follow up with, please let me know.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Do board members have any questions or comments they would like to share?
I just think it's exciting, as the last young man explained, that he took a variety of courses. He might be going into a different field, but that's part of exploring your careers, is trying some things out and seeing if they fit, and if maybe something else is a better fit. So quite frankly, that's a huge success, even though that he's not going into that field. And as a mom of a daughter who went into engineering, in part, she graduated long before all these transcripted credits, but the education she got at the La Crosse School District really set her up to be very successful, and we are always looking for more engineers, so that's exciting to hear about.
Thanks.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you for coming, and everybody. What a phenomenal program. Huge asset for the district. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Well, if you want to stick around for the meeting, you're welcome to, but if you want to take off now, you're also welcome to. I'm sure you have other obligations.
All right, so we will move on to our public speakers. We kind of flipped things tonight because we've had a very packed agenda. So before I invite speakers up, I'm just going to read a little statement. It is the policy of the board to provide at its public meetings an opportunity for individuals to address the board. Comments about individual staff or personnel will not be allowed. Open meeting law prohibits the board from engaging in discussion or responding to matters not included on the agenda. All speakers are reminded that the same policy limits your time to speak to 5 minutes. This limit will be strictly enforced. May I ask the superintendent to keep track of the time and notify the speaker when time is running out?
I'll do so. I'll let people know when they have 30 seconds left.
All right. You are also asked to give your name and the school district where you reside at the beginning of your time for the public record. Our first speaker tonight is Vicenza Valencia.
Vicenza Valencia, and I live in La Crosse. I am a 4th grader at Northwoods International School. We have been taught through IB to always ask questions, and I was wondering, why are kids at Northwoods worried about it closing? I asked my classmates this question, and I am here to share our ideas. My classmates talked about the reasons they love it at Northwoods. Some of my classmates have been here at the school since preschool and would miss all of their teachers and friends. It's close to many of our houses. We have an awesome playgrounds and a walking trail. There is nature all around our school. One student wants their sibling going into kindergarten to experience Northwoods. Other classmates are worried about what might happen next year. Some families would have to drive farther to get to a new school. My friend doesn't want to be the new kid at a different school. Our teachers would have to move around and we wouldn't be able to see the ones we love. We have made a lot of friends here and might not be able to keep in touch with them. Some of my classmates talked about why Northwoods is important to them. It's been the first school for lots of us. One of my classmates said, "At first I was scared, but now I have made so many great memories." We all really love it at Northwoods, so we really want it to stay open.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gabby Demo.
Hi, my name is Gabby, and I am in 3rd grade at Northwoods. I am here because I want to save Northwoods. We have music. It is fun because we get to play instruments at a young age. Every grade gets to have at least 2 concerts. We are an IB school, so that means we have Spanish. You get to do fun crafts. Our Spanish teacher, seniority writer, is nice to children. We have grow garden lessons. We get to taste vegetables and fruits. Once we made an organic smoothie and spinach dip. It was so good. Northwoods that put in a lot of hard work to remove all of the rocks from the field and plant new grass. The 2 playgrounds are very fun for little kids and big kids. There is a path to ride your bikes or walk on. Please don't close Northwoods because a lot of people like it and it's super fun.
Thank you, Gabby. Our next speaker tonight is Adam Minka.
All right, we do have a report handout to the school board members as well. All right, as we hand the report, I'd like to remind the school board that under the Students' Code of Rights and Responsibilities, students have the right to attend school in an environment that is free from the presence and use of alcohol and non-medical controlled substances and of related problems, and have the right to be free from influence of related problems associated with use of tobacco and other nicotine products, including liquid nicotine, e-cigarettes, vapor pens, or any other electronic smoking devices. Now, last year, I once overheard a student ask another student if they could buy weed off of the other while in a restroom. It was that year that I began to notice a rising issue of drugs inside the schools, and I and my friends no longer trusted using the public restrooms inside the school grounds because of several problems associated with smoking weed or vaping in the presence of students. The bathrooms became a punchline for several jokes, as teachers were struggling to keep up with people vaping or smoking during lunch or passing period. And stories like mine were not as uncommon as you might think. In June, we wanted to look more into this issue because we felt like the problem could only grow worse without awareness being brought to the public. And though we cannot explain our work in 5 minutes, we're hoping the report we gave you is a clear indication not only of the extent of the problem, but also some solutions we have researched, which we're hoping you will take consideration as you review your budget for the school. I'd first like to ask the question, how many students do you think use drugs of any kind in high school? How many students smoke weed in the bathrooms or vape in class when the teacher's not looking? If you're someone who's never entered the school, maybe you'd say 10% of students are on something. If you looked on the Youth Risk Assessment Survey, maybe you'd say 20%. But if you look more into the community, you find that we have a very stark underreporting of drugs inside the school. After I told Jake I heard students ask him about buying weed in the restroom, he asked me who it was, and so he pulled out a yearbook, and I was pointing to a lot of students that Jake said knew smoked something, or did some other kind of drug, and I eventually asked if he wanted to research more into this problem. He first looked over the yearbook further and recorded how many students he knew used some kind of drug, such as vaping, weed, pills, and etc. After a while, he said it came up with a rough percentage of how many students were on substance, and that number was around 60%. Now, I did not believe that number at first, even though students more likely tell another student about what they use as opposed to telling teachers or administration. And I occasionally saw some of my peers post online of them smoking or vaping on their Snapchat stories. Because I trust Jake, I said we would look into this more and decided to ask the police department what they predicted. After an interview with the department and with the presence of the school resource officer who was exposed to the drug environment, they agreed that 40% could be more around the corner. The police department also awakened us to a lot more than just numbers. In 2021, drugs began pooling the community of something new laced inside of them: carfentanil. This opioid makes substances 10,000 times more addictive, which is far stronger than any fentanyl and can be used in a very small amount to get that kick in a user. What scared me the most personally was that of the drugs tested in the city, 80 to 90% was positive of some kind of fentanyl, including this new drug. This means there's almost certainly laced drugs inside of our schools. We, of course, did our own research, but we also asked the school administration once school began if they thought that 40% of students could be using drugs. And to my utter surprise, the answer was a yes, and that those who tried it are way higher than the numbers given. Even teachers, which struggled with this problem for years, found our numbers to be interesting. One teacher in particular encouraged me to bring this information to the board, which I am greatly appreciative of. Unfortunately, we were told that finding an exact number would be impossible, but we are certain that there is a drug problem inside the schools because we see it ourselves. We can smell the blueberry raspberry vape or weed inside the bathrooms, and we the students can see our peers take a hit while they look at us in the eye. Just last week, we could smell weed from one of the bathrooms, and it's gotten so bad that me and my friends no longer use most of our restrooms again. If this isn't addressed, the problem will only worsen. Because of time constraints, I cannot speak about all of our research, but I'm asking you to take into consideration that the report says into your budget. We hope to be back soon and give more details on our 5 solutions outlined, including the vape detectors we have proposed for the restrooms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Jake Walters.
Good evening. I'm Jacob Walters, and I helped Adam with his research. So this drug problem in school is very apparent, and we found our numbers based on my personal experience. I fell through a very dark time when I had to say goodbye to my grandmother. She was a very important part of my life. She was always a person you'd want to be around. She was a giver and was the rock for me. Sorry, it's bringing back a lot of memories. After I fell into a deep hole, after I lost her of my grief and sadness, I wound up turning to drugs, and I went down a dark path. For almost a year, I fell down smoking a couple different things. And one day, I remember waking up from a dream where she asked me, was I happy? That was a question she'd always ask me, was I happy and did I love my life? She'd always support me. And I knew, looking in the mirror, that the shell of a person that stared back at me was not someone she'd be proud of or that I should be proud of. So, I knew that this was my moment to give back and to help lessen this problem. My story is not an uncommon one. We have multiple children that are facing hard issues in their life and they don't know what to do, so they turn to drugs and other things. And now with the increase of fentanyl, this could wind up a lot worse than it has been before. We need to take a stance. We need to be a proactive school district. We cannot be only reacting to this problem, but we must take moves to prevent this from happening and these numbers going up. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Amber Lebunk Peterson.
Hello, my name is Amber Leibengu Peterson. I am a school district of La Crosse parent, and I'm here to speak about potential elementary school closures. I want to start by thanking the school board for the opportunity to speak and the FAC for the difficult work and time they have put into their charge. I want to be upfront that I am a proud Emerson Elementary parent, but more importantly, a proponent of the quality education provided by the La Crosse School District. With the 50% chance of potential closure of Emerson Elementary and the 100% chance of elementary schools closing, I feel compelled to ask the community where our priorities lie. I've heard amazing things about all 4 schools up for closure, which makes me sad and very proud in the same breath. So I will speak a little bit to Emerson as the definition of a neighborhood school. According to district documents, Emerson has 0% of our students eligible for busing, which means every day students flock to school arm in arm with caregivers and friends from down the street. After school, it is more common than not to see students stay and play on the playground with friends before walking home. Emerson has walking access to UWL for physical education, theater arts, the planetarium, and other experiences that not only support their learning, but those of UWL education students needing vital teaching experiences to earn their degrees. While our footprint is small, we have walking access to Mike Park and the Marsh for unique science lessons that highlight the importance of La Crosse's natural resources. Now, what I can't say is that Emerson is unique in the community that is built in a smaller elementary school where you walk down the hall and everyone knows your name. What I can't say is that any of the 4 elementary schools is not valuable to their neighborhood, whether that be more urban or my favorite word, rural. I'm terrible at rural. What I can't say is that one school's population is more important in demographics or abilities because each serves a population with unique needs, whether it be cultural, other abled, special education, or socioeconomics. What I can't say is that our teachers and staff are more dedicated or loving than other schools because I truly believe the educators of La Crosse are top-notch. But I also want to say that Emerson's pretty great. We love our teachers. But my message as an Emerson parent is, why is the school district continually asking us what communities we are willing to give up instead of what our greater La Crosse community is willing to give for continued pride and growth of public education in La Crosse? Instead, I wonder what the district is doing to grow enrollment rather than accepting its fate of declining enrollment while pushing more and more families to choose surrounding districts or private education because we are losing our communities and reputation for excellence. I'm a librarian with expertise in research and access to data, so let me tell you what I did find. According to the 2021-2022 DPI annual report on open enrollment, La Crosse transferred out 337 students. That is paired with a transfer in of 341 students. Seems like a wash, right? No. What if we transferred in those 341 students still and worked to retain the 337 students that left? If I read the chart correctly, which I'm not sure I did, other districts benefited by $2,648,130 for our 337 losses. In comparison, the Onalaska School District had a net gain of 289 students and West Salem 62 students. This doesn't even include the 311 students, some La Crosse residents, some not, some going to parochial and private schools for different reasons, that opted into Blessed Sacrament and Cathedral as of the 2019-2020 school year, according to the IES, National Center for Education Statistics. It's important to cite. So I ask, why is it that we are looking to displace the children who are committed to our district, who are not just numbers, instead of looking at solutions that find revenue for the district? We have excessive capacity in elementary schools, split up the adult units at Hogan Administration, or have some units work virtually. That would save over $2.4 million in boiler HVAC costs in 2024-2025 to abandon the Hogan building, according to district documents. Emerson itself has proven what can be done with a small 2.6 acreage plus 1.6 Crowley Park acreage footprint. Does Northwoods need all 10.9 acres? Or Spence 7.9 or Hinchins 7.9? Could some of that land be sold for revenue and new housing? And if the district is going to keep the buildings and land, even if the site closes, then do we need to close 2 elementary buildings when we still have to maintain building costs? Why is the La Crosse School District fixated on the easy numbers, even though we all know it's not easy, of closing buildings instead of exploring all viable options for right-sizing our district?
30 seconds left.
And finally, why isn't the school district listening to what the caregivers of La Crosse are asking for? Looking around this room, which I will not do, I see worried, concerned, disheartened, caring people who want their small elementary communities to help their children mature into capable and kind humans before we send them on to the larger middle and high schools. What I see are people who are concerned for public education in La Crosse and feel their voices are being more and more ignored when it comes to funding neglected buildings and the atmosphere of prove your value in order to survive. I say our collective value is the unique opportunities and choices that each school provides in location, size, and program offerings that is vitally important to the community it serves. I also suggest that La Crosse has overwhelmingly screamed in referendums that we will support funding for public education.
Time is up.
Thanks.
speaker tonight is Eva Black.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to address the board today. My name is Eva Black. My family and I moved to the Grandview Emerson neighborhood from Los Angeles just over 2 years ago. We specifically chose this neighborhood for its history, its dense population, and its community school because we wanted to be closely connected to the city of La Crosse for ourselves and our 2 children who currently attend Emerson. We didn't want to live in the suburbs. We specifically chose this area for our kids to attend the neighborhood school that lies at the very heart of our community. Since moving here, we've learned about the challenges facing our school district, and one of the most significant hurdles is declining enrollment. Many families are opting for the suburbs or private schools, and we understand the concerns this trend raises. Now we've learned the school board is weighing school closures as a way to right-size the district, and Emerson is a school being considered. I'm here to firmly express that closing Emerson will not solve this problem, but could actually worsen it, forcing these families to make difficult decisions about their children's education. Emerson is not just another institution. It's a vital part of the La Crosse urban landscape, situated in a densely populated neighborhood in the heart of La Crosse, and one of the most walkable schools in our district. 73% of Emerson students live within 1 mile of the school, whereas another school in consideration, Northwoods, has only 11% that live within 1 mile of their school, and more specifically, nearly 80% of Northwood students live closer to another elementary school. These are striking discrepancies with immense community and financial impacts like long-term busing expense increases. Closing Emerson in this vibrant, walkable neighborhood would present our community with an ultimatum: stay with the district, seek private education, or consider other alternatives. We should be working to make our district more attractive with neighborhood schools for young families moving into the area rather than pushing them towards alternate options. The community has made it clear with the school district survey that neighborhood accessible schools are within the top 4 priorities of district families. Furthermore, we have thoroughly reviewed the Facility Advisory Committee documents and understand that while operating expenses for all schools are similar, Emerson's are actually the lowest. Emerson does have deferred maintenance needs. However, every building has these needs, and we should be careful to balance the short-term and long-term impacts of school closures. Deferred maintenance needs are solvable, and we must look at the long-term consequences of closing Emerson. Doing so would likely be significantly detrimental to the district's long-term viability, particularly with regard to declining enrollment. We urge the school board to reconsider closing Emerson and instead focus on finding sustainable solutions that will preserve the educational opportunities for our children and the future of our community. To conclude, I must emphasize that the children of this neighborhood have already experienced the closure of their middle school, Lincoln Middle. Closing Emerson would not only cause additional hardship to these children and their families, but also severely damage our community and the city of La Crosse. Again, this would further threaten the long-term viability of our school district, something none of us want to happen. We believe the potential of Emerson and its ability to thrive and contribute positively to our city and district. We implore the school board to take a step back and reconsider the decision to close Emerson. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Our next speaker tonight is Chao Nguyen.
Hi, my name is Chao Nguyen, and I am a parent of a student in La Crosse School District. Mine will be short and sweet. I'm here to share my personal experience as a landlord with properties near Emerson. In the past, I have had some of my properties contracted with New Horizon, and many of these women were my tenants. And they all felt very safe having their kids at Emerson because of the neighborhood. Specifically feeling safe because they know their classmate parents are there on the playground at pickups, as volunteers at schools, as they feel safe, as the kids walking home from school, and having neighbors at Jenna and Wygant neighborhood. I also have worked with many Section 8 voucher families. Their children went to Emerson specifically because of the neighborhood and the walkability to school. And just piggyback on what Amber and Eva has said, public schools, libraries, parks, and urban schools like Emerson is very important, if not the core of the social infrastructure of a neighborhood and a city. So to have a robust public school system, you have to have a thriving community, supportive neighborhood like Jenna and Wygant, who volunteer, strong participation from community and civic life. And I feel that Emerson is probably the cornerstone infrastructure of Jenna Neighborhood Association and probably Wygant. So please don't close Emerson or any of the urban schools. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deborah Kramer.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Deborah Cromer. I'm a resident of the Grandview Emerson neighborhood, but I'm here tonight because I am also the parent of a student who attended La Crosse School District schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. He spent all of his elementary years at Emerson. And before he was even a student at Emerson, my husband or I would walk with him past the school, and he would turn to Emerson and point and say, "That's my school, isn't it?" And we'd agree and walk on. In February, before my son started Emerson as a kindergartner, he and my husband were walking to the university. And on his birthday, Robin turned and started walking into the front doors of Emerson. And my husband said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Well, I'm 5 now, and that's my school." Now, my son felt a profound sense of belonging because that school was within sight of our house. He walked past it often. It was in our neighborhood. He knew lots of kids who attended that school. And he would play with those kids, he would associate with those kids before and after school and during the summer. He truly felt that he belonged there. He was happy there. And that's what, as a parent, I want for other people's children in my neighborhood. But I'm also here tonight because before I retired in 2019, I was a teacher for over 40 years. And most of those were based in an elementary school in a nearby district. Since I've retired, I've been volunteering in a variety of settings, in working with students in high school, middle school, and elementary. Currently, I'm volunteering at a La Crosse School District elementary school, not in my neighborhood. And I can tell you from all of those years of teaching and volunteering that it's very important for elementary children to feel that sense of belonging that my son felt at Emerson. Now, I know that you have hard choices as a board. I realize that from being in education so long. I don't envy you those choices. But I do know from my experience as both a parent and a teacher that the cost of repairing and maintaining a school like Emerson are important factors. And yet the cost of closing a school like Emerson, that is the heart of a neighborhood, that gives that sense of belonging, that is the right size, the right kind of environment for the children that are taught within it, that contributes to a neighborhood, and the neighborhood is part of that school. Those are costs that you can't compare, that you can't dismiss, because for those children that are still in my neighborhood who are going to be going to school in my neighborhood, and the other schools that are represented here. When students can walk to a school, when they see themselves as part of that community, that's a price beyond measure. So I urge you to think about that when you're making these hard decisions, that a school like Emerson is worth its weight in gold. Thank you.
That was our last speaker for tonight, so we will move on to our consent agendas. The first one we'll have is the superintendent. I'll pause a second, just if folks did want to leave, now's a cool time, but you're welcome to stay. Thank you for coming tonight, to those who are leaving. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the superintendent's consent agenda as presented.
All right, so the consent agenda is a mechanism used by the board to deal with routine business that must come before the body. With a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by, I did not hear who the second was. Okay, Dr. Sprague. We will approve the items on the consent agenda unless there are items that board members want to remove to discuss. All right, we will approve those as presented, and we will move on to our board consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented.
All right, with a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Ms. Berkedahl, we will approve the items on the board consent agenda as presented unless there are items that board members would like to remove. Hearing none, we will approve that as presented. And now we will move into some of our action items tonight. We have the 2023-2024 proposed budget approval coming before the board.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2023-24 proposed budget as presented.
Is there a second? Second. Okay. So we've got a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Ms. Berkedahl. I'm going to pause so we can have discussion, but just a reminder that at the end of the last meeting, we were getting short on time. I encouraged board members to reach out to Ms. Spring if there were any questions or areas where clarity was needed, so we won't spend a ton of time discussing tonight before we do a vote on the motion that's on the table. Yep.
I have just a couple of quick questions on the document that is the budget hearing document, the public hearing document. In the blue in the bottom is the capital expansion fund. Can you explain what that is a little bit? Because that was, it appears to have some relationship to the debt service funds from above, but I wanted to, since this is a public document, I want to be clear what's in that one. And then I had one other quick question.
Sure. Capital Expansion Fund is Fund 4140 that we tax for capital expansion, but it's included actually this $3 million in the operating referendum. So that's where the dollars are coming from.
So the amount in the capital expansion is what we receive for the operating referendum?
Partially. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going into debt for that.
My other question is, probably won't make a big difference, but when the consideration for closing Lincoln occurred, in the numbers that were given to the public and to the board, I assumed that the cost savings would include the administrator? Is that correct?
Yes, that was included as part of our estimated staffing savings or efficiencies there, yes.
And yet we then replace that administrator with another administrator in the district. And so I struggle with telling the public we need to close a school in part because of a savings of a cost, but then we take the cost and replace it elsewhere. I personally struggle with that. You've got the position filled. I'm not going to prevail on this point, but I just wanted to make that point that again, as we continue to work on being transparent with the public, that's just a point that was a struggle for me.
As we went through the process, we did indicate it wouldn't necessarily be overnight savings, that it may be realized over a period of time, in part to avoid layoffs of folks, and also to adapt to our new schools. What we saw when we brought in more students into our middle schools is our teachers were seeking additional administrative support. And I think they even wrote a letter to me that indicated that they wanted that additional support in their buildings to help address that change and the students that were there. And so I certainly want to make sure that we are honest with our public and forthright with what we say, but we also have to respond to the folks in our buildings and the needs of our students. And so it's a delicate balance between predicting the future and where we actually land. And I too am always hoping to see those gains realized so that we can continue to invest in students where they are best served.
Any other comments or questions from board members on the documents here?
I'm just clarifying, this is still preliminary and we're not close. So I just wanted to make sure that's stated that this is still very preliminary and this is, we'll have public input.
So we have to approve a budget plan in order to have a hearing. So we need to know what to talk about, all right? And then we will do, I think it's called the original budget and the levy certification later on in the month, October 23rd.
Thank you.
But like if there are burning questions, concerns, now is the time. So.
At least it's my opinion, I can't make a lot of comments on this because we don't have final numbers of revenue and where our students are sitting and how many students we have in seats, because we don't have those. So for me to review this as a budgetary outside of expenditures, there's not a lot of comments to me here on that point. So I just wanted to, like I said, state just kind of like this is still real preliminary for the public to know that we're just kind of walking through this at this point, but we still don't have final revenue side.
When we are presented with the final numbers and we have a hearing, I think it would be helpful to have some sort of conversation from administration in response to one of the presenters' comments tonight about what we're doing to mitigate the loss of students to other districts around here. I'm sure we're doing things, it just would be helpful to have some context around that.
I in particular would like to see like those comparative numbers over time, honestly, as far back as we can get them.
They're in the budget report for like 10 years.
So all of those very important pages will be updated, and I will present them again to you on October 23rd so that you do see the final numbers and the tax impact by municipality. So all of that will be updated before you approve the final budget.
And if I remember right, I thought when we talked about the ins and outs of enrollment, the district provided, at least I know I've seen it at some point, some pretty detailed analysis of, contacting parents, understanding if it's personal situations or if there was true choice. But I agree with Katie that would be a good thing for us to revisit that conversation because it's.
Are you requesting it for the October 23rd? Like, so you're requesting that you have the information on what we're doing before that, before we approve the budget on this?
I don't know if you can, because it's we're just learning about those numbers right now.
I think
so
we can put it maybe like as a information item or workshop or something like that, where we get more information on that particular piece.
Agreed.
We'll have a full analysis of our enrollment, open enrollment, grade levels, intra-district transfers, buildings, all of that stuff. And so if that's would be a good piece of our budget book to look at, as it's a primary driver of revenues. And so we can certainly have that ready and available for an information item.
I think it's difficult to get a true picture of some of it because some of it is new families moving into the area. And if families choose to move into another community and go to their schools, at a different rate than they used to move into lacrosse. Again, it would be difficult to get that information. But I think based on the comment from the public speaker, that may be happening, but it would be difficult to get a handle on exactly what that number is. But it is something that sits in the back of my mind and concerns me. If I'm moving to this area, what district would I want my kids to go to school in?
I'm trying to figure out how I can get at that, and we can get the addresses of all new sales, all home sales, and we can look at if they have kids currently in our school district, or if 4 years later they enroll a kindergartner, so hopefully work with somebody from UW La Crosse or a researcher who can take this information and try and see, has that trend changed? Do they buy a house and enroll a kid in our school district? Has that changed over time? I don't know how far back I can get data, but I am curious about, is there a trend in where people live, move? We hear about housing shortages and affordable housing, but can we quantify that in some way? And I'm curious if it's possible.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, again, because as housing developments continue to go up in some in our district, mostly in other districts, and we have an aging housing stock here, what impact does that even have? So I think that there are a lot of things that are related to that would be difficult for us to get some true information.
All right.
How do we get our membership numbers? It's not just through the census, though. Not our students in the seats, our area membership for our revenue limit.
Our membership is our resident students, whether they're attending La Crosse or if they're attending another public school.
Yeah.
And that has to do with open enrollment, in or out. We do not count any private schools within our
But
open enrollment.
private school students still count towards our revenue limit calculation, correct?
No.
Only if they do as it relates to vouchers. So if they accept a voucher, then those students do get quantified underneath our revenue limit. And that's another piece of information Ms. Sprang and I are interested in. Who are the students that are accepting vouchers? Were they in our schools recently? Did they move in? That the DPI doesn't share that information with us. I think we should have access to it. We're levying their money for them to go to school elsewhere. We should at least have an address and an age, some basic information that we have that anybody can get about our students. We should be able to gain access to that information to get a better idea of what's going on so that we can properly plan for the future. And as it relates to homeschool, you're supposed to enroll through the Homer portal through the DPI, so we can get an idea of that. And then the private schools do generally report attendance through the DPI, especially now that vouchers are involved. And then the pressures from the WIAA give us numbers as well. So we can get a pretty good estimate of where student enrollment is in our region broadly, and then what percentage of those are choosing La Crosse.
All right. We're ready to vote. So we had a motion by Mr. Korberg, and was the second by Ms. Berkedal? Okay. So all those in favor of approving the 23-24 proposed budget as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
All right, moving on to our next matter reserved for board action, which is the monitoring report that we reviewed over 2 separate meetings for operational expectation 11, the instructional program.
I'll make a motion in regard to the monitoring report for policy OE11 instructional program, and with respect to the provisions of policy BSR5, superintendent accountability. The Board of Education concludes that the superintendent and district are in compliance with exceptions noted.
I'll second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the motion carries. So we will now move on to our information items. So that was approving the monitoring report that looked back. This is our opportunity to look at the template, which includes the indicators and the superintendent's interpretation for our next cycle. So yes, I will pass it off to Dr. Engel.
And I will in turn turn it over to Dr. Harsey.
Yeah, I just have 3 areas for the board's consideration for possible modifications going forward. So I'll walk you through. We'll start with 11.2, and then I will tell you up front, 11.7, I think I started to going to a field really, which is not perhaps my territory to kind of step into. So I just did that based on conversation we had at the last board meeting. So I'm prepared and comfortable to back out of that field as soon as the board lets me know that. And then finally 11.8. So let's start with 11.2 again. We can leave the report as is, but part of the consideration with 11.2, and you can see the proposed change language there. The state standards and/or vetted national standards are reflected in the curriculum for all subject areas. Indicators 1, 2, and 3 essentially are saying the same thing. My obligation to the board then would just make sure, and we somewhat had this conversation here at the board table, but would be to give representative samples so that the board would be comfortable that that indicator is being met with various examples throughout our particular state standards, and so in curricular areas. So I just proposed that it would be a singular indicator with a variety of examples underneath. That would be one suggestion, and then of course indicators 2 and 3 would be deleted essentially. 11.7, this one might take a little bit more discussion and consideration from the board. Here's the area that I don't know that it's normally in years past anyway, it's just been indicator conversation. When we spoke last time, I heard some conversation and my notes indicated that maybe the interpretation read more like a results policy. I will tell you that it's serendipitous. We were having this conversation about, don't we do something like that in a results policy? Well, Dr. Huckey's going to be coming up here shortly with 3.6, and maybe you noticed that too. In both 3.5, frankly, when we talk about intersectionality, social location, et cetera, 3.5 and 3.6, both kind of cover that in that results policy. Now, having said that, I did put, again, another interpretation, some possible language for the board to consider, and for meeting that particular goal there, and then some definitions that cultural humility and social justice, those definitions we pulled out of our equity toolkit. We've been working with Social Responsibility Speaks over the last several years, pulled those definitions right out of that toolkit. Again, just for the board to kind of mull over and discuss, and if that better meets the intent, we're happy to move in that direction. And then in the indicator, indicator 1, we have it written currently, the district strategic plan annually focuses on social justice and cultural competency. We've moved more towards a cultural humility approach. The difference basically with cultural competency, you're studying other people. Cultural humility, you're really focused on yourself and critical self-reflection and moving systems forward, and that with a lot of humility and introspection, regardless of who comes into your classroom, who comes into your district. You've worked on yourself enough that you're going to be able to work with and help advance any students and any families in a positive way. So our suggestion would be move forward with a cultural humility language versus cultural competency. Certainly space for both. They don't conflict at all. They actually build on one another. But that would be the suggestion there with both the indicator and then that other area that I don't know was my area necessarily to work in. And then finally in 11.8, a similar kind of reduction in indicators 3, 4, and 5. We're saying the same thing over and over again. We just level it with elementary, middle, and high school. The suggestion would be kind of, again, a singular. All schools will review and analyze school report card data to make necessary school improvement plan adjustments in the continuous improvement efforts for instructional programs. And then again, it would be my task then to give you enough examples or artifacts where the board would be satisfied with what was supplied. Those are my suggestions, and I'd listen to any discussion.
Discussion from board members.
Got a comment on 11.2 and 11.8. So you're looking to reduce both of them kind of down to a single indicator. I think similar to standard space grading, we're kind of going against, you're going to lose some of the nuance, I think. I understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to make it a more efficient delivery of information, but I also think that, not having that ability to break that out and for us to review it on a individualized basis might be diluting it, I guess, maybe. So, I don't know, it's my first take as I review that.
Are you meaning, so if we're seeing state standards for elementary, middle, high school all in one, if the middle schools
We're
are
blending-
not where we
we're
want them to
blending
be,
versus-
do we have the same opportunity to, yeah,
Correct.
I see what you're saying.
So that's my concern.
Does it change your workload to do it one way versus the other?
It doesn't make an incredible workload difference for me. I really want to, also, the caveat would be, I want to give the board what the board would like. If it's more acute and precise and there's clarity with each of those breakouts, then that's great. To me, this is a report with, as we've said, with each of the kind of the preludes to it's a monster, it's a, all these, it's so big. I was looking for ways to kind of accordion it down, but we can also leave it as is, and I'm completely comfortable with where we're at currently. So,
For either of those, we would be providing representative samples, kind of generally speaking anyway, and whether that was from across subject matters or grade levels, our intent would be 100% compliance every year, and anywhere we did not have compliance, we'd be relating what areas or what levels those would be at. But I also echo Dr. Harsey's comments.
So does that mean whether it's a singular field with multiple points of evidence or it's a threefold field, right, one for each grade level, we have really the same opportunity to fault find, not that I expect there to be any faults, right? But we have the same opportunity to get in at that fine grain level and say, ooh, this area right here is not in compliance. So I guess my question, and maybe we're having the same one then, is as a process matter, as our work, is it better to have it in 3 indicators? Does it help us to point where we're really trying to, at a fine grain, and direct attention in those areas? Excuse me, losing my voice still.
Yeah, and I think there's also maybe the issue of for next year, you'll know exactly what we want because we've talked a lot about it. But as you remove those indicators and other board members come on the board and time passes, will that same focus on those things be there? That would maybe be a risk if it was shrunken down.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, you want to give us what we want. So if we're letting you know what we want, whether it's in 3 or 1.
There's more categories. It helps us pad our percentage, and we can demonstrate, more things went well. If it's a single thing, there's a greater risk that you get a no-go on the one thing. So, I mean, approach it lots of different ways. There's no problem with leaving it as it is.
Yep.
And we're just recommending, we're providing an opportunity to consolidate just a little bit with a similar amount of evidence to maybe expedite our time on things that should be standard practice that you should see 100% success on every year anyway.
And I was the person who brought up kind of condensing it, and to be honest with you, I think that I still kind of wonder, is there a way, my concern is not with what you've done, but with how broad the policy is, and could the policy be maybe 2 policies or more than 1 policy with some specific focuses? Because again, the data in the reports we got the last 2 meetings is so vital and so crucial, and I just want to make sure we as a board, there's so much work, staff time that's gone into it, and we want to make sure that we just take the appropriate amount of time and really digest it and consider it and not rush through it. But my concern about the rushing through it isn't about you. I'm concerned our policy might be too broad. So I just want to make that clarification.
So a reminder to board members, if you do have policy change recommendations.
I don't, that's my problem.
Yeah, and so as time goes, even if we're off the cycle, if you boardsmith it one Friday night and you're ready to go, like, you can email it to me and talk with me, and I can work with Laura about if there's a time to fit it in.
Thank you.
So, okay. Was there any strong feeling about condensing it? I heard more feelings about keeping 3. But if nobody has a strong feeling opposite, I think we can signal what we want.
I mean, I guess I'm just thinking we can undo it if we find it next year unsatisfactory, right?
Mhm.
Try
Yeah.
it this way.
This is
And
just
this as a standard.
approval for
that-
one.
And what?
This is just for one
Right.
cycle, right?
And
So if it's,
as a standard that is talking about aligning some critical documents and making sure that the language of the state standards is being reflected, this seems like almost a good guinea pig to do that. It's not one that, it's not, doesn't strike me as a high risk one.
okay. All right. So I'm hearing we will keep the 3 in both sections and not condense. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I heard you. I'm sorry.
We'll keep the 3
Okay.
indicators instead of consolidating into one in the 2 subsections. We'll just keep it like what we had before.
Perfect.
Okay.
But just sort of with the understanding that, as I recall, our discussion was looking to see a bit more from each of the different subject areas, representative examples.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So 11.7. So a reminder that interpretations, we cannot wordsmith as a board, but we can do this or this. And there was some discussion about last time, so the interpretation on the last cycle was approved before, along with the indicators. So we were comfortable moving forward. Now we have the opportunity with this interpretation to say yes or no.
I like the changes. I think it clarifies it a little better. I think it outlines it, and gives it more idea of what's going there, what the terms are, and what's the goal, what the goal is. So I like the new changes.
They seem a better match for the evidence provided.
Yeah.
I have maybe one quibble that is a wordsmithing thing,
Is it
but just
wordsmithing? Because
it
we
kind
can't
of is. It's
wordsmith.
the idea of social justice tenets. Just that phrasing seems to suggest that there is one set of those things out there, and I think there are many broadly agreed upon ones, but there's not like the Agency for Social Justice, which certifies this particular set of tenets. You know what I mean? Like, so I share the appreciation for the language. I think the shift from competency to humility is a good one as well. And thank you for explaining the justification for that and the relationship between the two. That just struck me.
My only clarification would be that, it asks us to include cultural humility and social justice as core tenets, not indicating that there are tenets of those. And so those two concepts would just be pieces that we include as a school district as important in our professional development, as opposed to adopting some tenets of cultural humility or social justice. So those concepts are important to us as a school district, but not defining what those are other than down below.
Physically, emotionally, psychologically,
Correct.
Safe and secure, certainly.
Okay. So we aren't voting on this tonight, but it sounds like board members were generally okay with the interpretation. Furrowed brows, yes? Okay. Yep. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so we're moving on to our next information item, which is a results monitoring report for our 3.6 involved citizenship. Just as a reminder, so this is the final piece of R3 that we're reviewing on that cycle. So R3 involves citizenship has 6 subparts, and we take those over time. You'll notice right after this we have an information item, the whole R3, where we'll get a chance for the board, since there are new members on the board, to get like a real quick discussion of what R3, the whole thing is, because we will vote on that at our next meeting. So a reminder, the results policies, so we have 3 of them. We vote next week on whether we believe that reasonable progress was made for each indicator. So that's kind of the standard of like a reasonable person and reasonable progress that we're assessing the evidence given to us. I'll pass it off to Dr. Lehecki.
Good evening. The other day we had a meeting talking about the order. We wanted to present different items, and Mrs. Frang astutely said, why don't we put after OE 11, why don't you have 3, 6, and 3 go before OE 7? And that makes a lot of sense after the discussion I just heard, in that you're going to find a lot of, I guess, similarities in some of the thoughts that were just presented. So it makes logical sense, I think, to present these 2 items in order. So 3.6 is the last one of our results 3 policies. Now, I know that not the entire board was here for every one, and when we move on to the next board report, that information's been provided. But our 3.6 is demonstrate awareness of the ways historical and current systems of oppression work together to produce injustice and identify strategies for addressing these systems of oppression. This has been a work in progress over the last 3 years. This is our 3rd year with this results policy. And it'll be our 2nd year with actual data from English language arts, and our 1st year with social studies. And I'll go into a little bit more detail. So this is a curriculum-based measurement. One of the tricks is, or not a trick, but we don't want to do anything in our schools just for the board, right? If we do that, nobody wins. If I say, oh, we got to do this because the board wants it, that doesn't build a lot of buy-in with our staff. So what we do is we try to build in what we do for the board as part of our daily operations. And this is an example of that. So our 3.6, this is a curricular assignment in English 11 that we've collected data, and we've improved our systems over the last few years to the point where we had full participation in English 11, except for AP English. The AP 11 English, it's a little harder to weave this into the curriculum, and that'll be our work for this year, to get them to participate with a similar prompt that's more connected to the AP curriculum. So you can see our participation went from 125 last year to 282, so much more representative of our junior class in English 11. We specifically chose a core course rather than placing these things in electives to increase our exposure for students. So normally when we do these kind of tables, I'll say in advance, we start with the positive, where we want people to be with the advanced, and then go 3, 2, 1. This particular one is laid out 1, 2, 3, 4. With that being said, generally when we look at standardized results, we look at proficient, advanced, and combine those. So doing the quick math, you can see in 2022 we had 40% of our students proficient proficient advanced, and in 23 we had 43% of our students proficient advanced. What we did was looked at the play Raisin in the Sun, and then there was a writing prompt that went with it for our English 11. Our teachers had rubrics as we moved to standards-based learning that they evaluated students upon, and 2 rows in that rubric are what is reported for the data for you tonight. So we increased our participation, and we also increased the amount of students who are proficient and advanced in ELA for indicator 1. For indicator 2, this is a new approach for us, and it'll be interesting to receive feedback from the board on this. So for 3.5 with social studies, if you remember, for those who were there for that presentation, it was related to a contest of Shoah, Holocaust remembrance, and we baked that curricular assessment with our middle school students to be able to also participate in this local contest, right? For this particular one, when I worked with social studies, they wanted to try a point in time. So this data is from our 8th graders last spring, and just gives a flavor of beliefs related to R3.6 at a particular point in time. I did find a couple things interesting that I wanted to share with you. One is the high amount of our students that aspire to be upstanders. If you look at question number 4, 97.2 agree or slightly agree, 97.2% of students indicate that they want to step up and do the right thing. If you look what it looks like in practice, what is interesting to me, if you look at question 8, if it's related to a specific gender, it's still 89.9, but there's a gap, right? So some of our students aspire, but perhaps on a particular topic may not report. Or if question 12, or not question 12, question 8:14, I'm willing to tell a friend that I am not interested in hearing slurs about LGBTQ people. That one was 93.8, so once again high, but still a gap. So why is that gap? I thought that was interesting to look at in the data of why there'd be that disconnect for students. Question number 12 is an example of how this kind of data also informs some of the other work that we do. We live in the time of book bans or book reconsiderations. So this would be an interesting, I think, data piece if we did receive a reconsideration challenge to say, here's how our middle school students feel about a particular book, or at least a thought of the genre. So overall, interesting, and a different way to look at, I think, the results policy data. And be interested to hear thoughts regarding both indicators, but in particular indicator 2, because that was a little bit different sort of results data than we've presented to the board in the past.
I have a question before I turn it over to the board real quick. So with indicator 2 on the social studies point in time survey, was this given after any lessons, or at what point was?
A point in time. It wasn't part of a sequential lesson, no.
Okay. Questions from board members on these ones?
Indicator 2 isn't offered as a comparative. So we're not looking at progress. We're looking at this year as a snapshot, and it looks good. But the indicator calls for a comparative. So I don't know if we just need to bring in last year's indicator.
Yeah, and it's tricky because this is our first time.
It's also a different indicator.
Doing this one, yeah. Correct. So when we've had this come up in the past, the board has talked a lot about what that should look like. Is that not, reasonable progress not made because not enough time has passed to give us enough evidence? Or do we say this is going in the right direction, so we say reasonable progress for what the evidence that's given to us, and then when we get a couple more points on the graph, we can start so that's really up for the board to decide.
The second indicator though it's not connected to curriculum. That's the issue that I have with it. It doesn't show that the district is doing anything to improve those scores. You're just taking a point in time. I think the indicators and evidence in this results policy have been probably the most disappointing for any that we've seen, because it's such important work, and I don't envy your job and having to prove that we're doing it as a district, because it's hard to prove and come up with evidence of these things. But for indicator 1, students are reading an old book that they've probably read for decades. That doesn't show me that we've made any progress as a school district. And same with indicator 2, we're just asking students, where are you at right now? It has nothing to do with what we're teaching them. I'm curious if we've asked our partners at Social Responsibility Speaks if they have any recommendations for how we could collect this data and
Yes, I've met with them specifically on this particular topic. they haven't run into it before. When I attended the Wisdom Sharing Conference, I brought these indicators as well. I would say that this is unique. I didn't run into anyone at the conference that had these particular indicators, and there's not a standardized test, right?
Right.
Which is what people generally rely on, that we can norm and we can compare and we do year to year. So the approach has been, we're just going to keep building this ship within our general curriculum. That is, as I said before, our staff needs to know the why. And if the why is just for the board report, that's a miss for us. So it takes time to build that capacity with staff to say, okay, you know, I know you're doing this work. Here's a resource. Raising the Sun is a newer choice for us in the district. We brought that on specifically because of the board policy, but it was also related to the standards that we want to address in English 11. So there was that connection there for people.
I feel like the why is an easy answer in this area because it's related to our strategic plan for educational equity. Like this is part of what's baked into our core values as a district.
Yes, yep. So identifying the essential standards is a big piece. In our standards-based work, we were, I would say, more standards reference. So year one, we identified those essential standards in our classes. Then it led to what are the resources out there that we can select to address that. The rate of change is somewhat dependent outside of administrator control. And I would say we work with staff collaboratively to make it feel like it's theirs rather than mine or ours.
And I think as it relates to like, do we teach about this stuff? You know, that would be OE 11. That's the curriculum that gets to OE 11.7, and we had some debates about that too. And maybe there's room for improvement there as far as like, is our curriculum oriented in the right way that we want it to? What we're trying to get after in the results policy is like, did kids learn it? Like, can they demonstrate the things that we're interested in? And so this shouldn't tell us if we taught it, except that they know about it. And so it's a kind of a gross measure of progress in that area. It's not going to point back specifically to maybe any one thing we did, but if our kids, if like with this survey, right, if we gave this as an exit survey for 12th graders, say, and the board liked this as like some sort of standard for whether or not they understood various types of oppression and were oriented positively towards it, then a lot of kids should say they agree or strongly agree, and then we would know that because of our curriculum or in spite of it, they're walking out of our school doors with this social justice orientation. And so OE 11 would be like, did we teach it? What does our curriculum look like? The results policy is, did they get it? And is what we're trying to measure, do they get it? And
but OE 11 doesn't show us what the curriculum looks like.
The board's policy there is ensure that the instructional program utilizes a social justice lens and is culturally responsive and competent. And perhaps our indicators don't meet the board's expectations around what that looks like specifically, and we can certainly continue that conversation. But in terms of, did kids walk out with that understanding and that knowledge, that would be in a test or a writing prompt that they exercise through our 3.6. And I think that's a constant tension about like where this stuff falls, and we're certainly open to like continuing to refine what that looks like and providing the evidence that satisfies the board around those concepts.
I mean, I guess for that indicator too, which is kind of why I asked the question, like, was this after, like, when did the assessment occur of the students' feelings of how they think they would react in situations? Like, was it tied to lessons, or at what point in time did it happen? So I could understand, but because we're looking for, like, students demonstrating something. But then I also think, like, if they're just saying what, like, those Likert scales, is that like demonstrating? So I was just trying to click on all my tabs and look at the policy for our 3.6 and demonstrating awareness of the ways historical and current systems of oppression work together to produce injustice and identify strategies for addressing these systems of oppression. And I feel like that strategies piece maybe would make that indicator stronger instead of just how students think they might react? Like, can they demonstrate that they have those strategies? Do you kind of get what I'm saying or where I'm going with that?
And the board up to this point has shied away from student surveys on the results policies. They didn't want a student's impression of their progress on these things. They want it, the board up to this point has indicated that they want evidence, more than just a student's like self-assessment. They want, something in writing, so to speak. Can they actually do it and articulate it more than just clicking a button on a survey? And that's what the first indicator is, and that's what we've been pursuing for 3 years now, is something that demonstrates that in 11th grade, on a writing assignment, after reading an article about historic oppression, can they articulate that, well in a writing prompt? And some students can, 40-some%. And we made slight progress this year, which is great. Is that sufficient? We can certainly debate that and continue to look for better ways to get after that. The survey thing, I think, is just a new opportunity to try and see if this meets the board's needs, and if it doesn't, we might still do it for our own purposes to understand how our kids think about these issues, because it's important, but it doesn't need to be a part of the evidence that we provide to the board if it's not meeting the board's needs, because it hasn't up to this point. It's a shot to kind of see if, does this satisfy this indicator in any way, and maybe it doesn't.
Correct. And so I brought up right when we started with the indicator too, I'm like, well, let's see, I'd really be interested in hearing the board's perspective, because it's a little different approach. One that was more aligned to what I saw at the national conference.
Survey data is very common for other coherent governance school districts. We believe that we raise the bar above average, but it is a common approach in other places.
Is it a common approach as the sole evidence, or is it a part of a broader group of evidence?
Most of the time, when I look at the other districts, they don't have anything. Our R4 or R3.4, 3.5, 3.6 are generally La Crosse specific. So theirs are more youth risk behavior survey data about belonging, those type of things. So we go in some different waters, but each community is unique, which is one of the takeaways from the conference. So we have to provide what the community is looking for.
What are board members thinking about this, then? The evidence given, sorry, I'm just I have like a million unnecessary tabs, all for R3.6. Are we thinking that the evidence given is sufficient for the indicators that were approved previously?
I don't think so.
Well, for 2, you got to start somewhere. So over the prior year, obviously, isn't there. But in a year from now, you would have that. But I think it's showing, indicator 1, we can see that.
Would you feel differently if the numbers were not so positive? Right, like we're looking at these percentages and saying, well, this is 97%, and these strongly agree and some would agree, right, areas, and that's what we want to see overall, right? If we're looking at this indicator and the numbers were not favorable, would that change our opinion of the indicator itself?
Well, I think it would indicate that we have more to go.
Right. Right. So I think it works, right? And going in the future, I agree with you. And I mean, I'm a writing teacher, and I'll read the student essays if you want, but I don't think everybody else really wants to do that as their evidence of this happening. Of course, an individual student is an even smaller snapshot. So as surveys are slippery, right? And they're difficult, and they're an unsatisfactory measure of most everything. Right, but is it the best we have, and does it at least point us to the areas where more work might be needed? And that gives me hope for this, but then I'm like, is this giving what this is asking us for, and that's kind of no still.
So you're saying the evidence for indicator 2 is not giving us what we're asking for?
Because we don't have anything from the prior year, and that's really the only reason.
So it's
If
like
we had 2 years of
it's
this.
a technicality, not like a beef with the evidence.
Yeah, I think the
itself.
indicator can work, or can at least be valuable, and is maybe the best we have available to us. As I'm hearing you saying, it's not like anybody else has something better for us to emulate. Right? Was that your takeaway from?
Yeah, this was uncharted territory at the conference. I did, Social Responsibility Speaks has shared it with some of their organizations as well.
Mhm.
And they pointed back to curriculum-based measurements. Another avenue to explore could be when we get more savvy, I think, with our standards-based report card. When we add in our standards and outcomes, there may be some data there, but we're not fully at that at our secondary levels. That might be one coming down the road as an indicator, but it would be incomplete at this point.
I would say that even if you liked indicator 2, there's no way we can like show reasonable progress this year because we didn't give it the year prior. So it's got to start somewhere, and so there's that. And this is an opportunity to ask, like, is this kind of data useful? Would it be helpful next year to see if anything has changed? The question for us really is like, is indicator 1, is that reasonable progress? The results from a selected English language arts curriculum assessment will show increased awareness of system suppression over the prior year. And so that's what we're more curious about, like, is this continuing in the right direction?
So maybe we can split our discussion into 2, tackle 1 first, and then move on to 2. Okay, so indicator 1, the English curriculum assessment. Do we think that going through my tabs again, that the evidence is sufficient for that indicator?
No.
I mean, the
No.
advanced numbers by percentage went down. Right? We have significantly more students taking the assessment. I think we could have expected to see, you know, a bell curve, frankly, of the responses, even if we had done nothing.
So by and large, we use advanced and proficient as like a gross measure of success. Last year it was
40%,
and this year it was
43.
You know, those are small numbers, but on things that are novel and hard to measure, the larger sample size, that's why we marked it reasonable progress, because it was greater than last year. I could also see arguing next meeting about whether or not this indicator is things people like, but in terms of like the actual measure, we would argue that we made reasonable progress.
At the very least, in having more students participate, so having more of a snapshot.
Is there any way to get data on the AP 11 courses?
It's from last spring. Those students have transitioned to 12th grade. It would be harder to capture.
My personal opinion on indicator 1 is I feel the evidence is sufficient. Indicator 2, I think there's opportunity for more discussion on that one. This one is a curriculum assessment, which is what the indicator asked for. And, you know, the difference in percent proficient and advanced, to me, that there's so much noise over time that amount didn't feel significant enough to say no.
Frankly, I think I agree with you, and while I'm a little disheartened by the percentages, the overall numbers at those levels are encouraging. And if we have another year and another year with 282 or more, you know, a closer comparison in terms of sample size, I think that'll be more encouraging.
And both of these assessments are devised by teachers, right? Is that what you were saying earlier?
Correct.
Right. I mean, that makes a difference when, to your point, that is this the best measure we have? Like, I know for a fact, having sat in the classroom, that they do social justice lit circles, where students pick a topic they're passionate about, and they read about it, and they write about it. But that's gonna look different in every single class, and the prompt is gonna look different for different books. But this, if we want something comparable that captures everybody, we end up sacrificing a little bit of that specificity and that deeper knowledge, that richer data, in order to have something that is useful for the purposes of comparison.
Another strategy we've debated over the years has been, do we create a list of things that have happened that demonstrate progress? Like, we've done more things now than we did historically, in different places? Or do we try and create a guaranteed and viable opportunity for every student to demonstrate proficiency at some point? And so our goal has been the latter, to find a place that every kid will encounter this, so that we get an opportunity to instruct them on that through our curriculum, to measure them on their progress. And ideally we want 100% of all of our students on these measures. That's unrealistic in the short term and maybe ultimately. But progress, is our goal. And as we roll this out and ensure that more and more students have access to this and take it, we hope to continue building that progress so that every kid has an opportunity to demonstrate proficiency on the measures that we're looking at in our results policies.
And if it were a standard and a standards-based approach, it means they could demonstrate that proficiency in Q1 if they came with it, or in Q3 if they got it after intervention. Like, you will have some kids who come to 8th grade ready to stand up and shout down somebody using slurs, and other kids who kind of learn over the course. I don't know. It would be interesting to see how that goes.
I do see that opportunity for the standards-based report card to have more concrete data that would encompass multiple data points that are teacher selected or teacher driven, because you don't have to drive the resource with that, you would drive the standard and the learning that goes with it. So I think long-term, that's the avenue to go. We're not there yet. This is kind of a practice year, and not a practice year for standards, but in some of our reporting of it. But down the road, that's definitely an area to add as an indicator, which I feel personally I'm more confident about that data point than what we have currently.
Okay, indicator 2, discussion. So obviously, it's just one time, so we can discuss the technicality issue. I personally think it might be more helpful to discuss the evidence, because if we're obsessed with the technicality and then next year we get the same evidence and we are like, we don't want a survey, then we've missed our opportunity to correct the course and receive the evidence that we want. So I'd like to put the technicality piece aside and focus on the evidence given to us. Let's pretend hypothetically we've seen evidence like this before and we can say there's time that's passed. Is this evidence sufficient for the indicator that we approved previously? Jeff is shaking his head.
I feel like I like the survey results because it gives me a feel for what a snapshot in time for our students, where they're at, what they feel. Like, it helps me get a broader picture. But I feel like, similar to indicator 1, something curriculum-based, something that's standardized to a point where there's something we can trend out, should be the ultimate goal. Like, I like the survey results because, again, it's just extra. And as you go through these reports, you're trying to get as much as we can to try and, for me especially, being newer, kind of really absorb my way into where I feel like we're at. But I don't think as a standalone it's meeting the indicator.
Other thoughts?
I think the data over time should help to direct the strategy of the district with curriculum, right? So if part of my issue with indicator 2 is, let's say next year the scores drop and we want to answer the question, why did that drop? What are we teaching? What aren't we teaching? The evidence isn't going to show us that because it's a point-in-time survey. Like, while it might be interesting right now to look at it, might be interesting next year, it won't give us information needed to drive strategy moving forward because it won't show us where the actual gap is. Or conversely, what we did right.
And it might be a useful tool for the teacher who wants to decide what they're going to teach next, but that doesn't help us with the evidence,
Yeah.
what moved the needle, if anything.
Yeah. And with one, I don't mind that as a piece of evidence. I just think it's insufficient because it only addresses historical racism, not current, not sexism, homophobia, or transphobia. I mean, there's a lot that's missing out of what we're expecting to see here.
Okay. So I want to pause on that before we go more on indicator 2, because I feel like so if you look at indicator 1, we have a selected ELA curriculum assessment, which maybe for next time we can say, because a selected means like one, and it could be any form of oppression, right?
But it also says increase awareness of systems of oppression, and it's only one.
I would indicate in the prompt that there is a connection to today as far as the writing prompt goes. So it is using that older resource, but it's then students are asked to connect it to racism and systems of oppression they would see today. So there is that connection to make it at least more current. Although it is an older resource, almost intentionally, to set the stage.
Looking around the table, if there's any thoughts on that one to revisit. It's also, if not this time, potentially when we approve the indicators for R3, the opportunity to say, need more indicators, or board has been dissatisfied with limited evidence given. So for the next round, we want to be explicit by approving indicators that say like multiple curriculum assessment pieces. I mean, it depends on how much the board needs to say reasonable progress has been made, right?
We certainly need to make progress within what we've said we're going to do. Dr. Lahaki also indicated that this doesn't exist anywhere else. There's no other school district in our state that focuses on this in such an explicit way, from the board to our administration to our teachers and our students. And I don't want to pat ourselves on the back for doing something we ought to do anyway, and have progress to make substantially. But this is uncharted territory also, and I just want to throw that out there as some context, not to excuse any lack of progress, but there's not a model for this to follow. And we're doing our best to, as we've talked about, incorporate this in the routine work of teachers in a comprehensive way. And I certainly agree that it can't just be about one thing, it has to be about it all, and how do we tackle all of that. The comprehensive nature of that within our curriculum as it is challenging, and it's certainly something we can continue to build out, in various places. And whether it's ELA, we talk about racism, and then maybe in a social studies curriculum we talk about sexism, and have opportunities to assess there. Doesn't mean we can't do it right now, but there is Dr. Lahaki's expressed hesitance to just top down say you're going to implement this thing next year without trying to make it organic and a part of everything else we're doing. And right, you can't wait with social justice efforts. I understand that too, the time is now, but I just throw that out there as some context. It doesn't excuse if we haven't made progress, as we said we would, or the measures don't meet the board's expectations, but that's context I feel compelled to just add.
Yeah, I look at what RE 3.6 says, and then I look at the indicators, and does every indicator have to meet everything? And, you know, I think an indicator sometimes can only, or in this case, an indicator's connected to a subject, a school subject. Can every school subject cover all the wide breadth of it? And I think what we're looking for is, does the full curricula cover the full breadth of it? Not English covers all of it and social studies covers all of it. That would be how I would read the policy, and what I would think is a reasonable expectation. Kind of what you were saying, Dr. Engel, I kind of see it that way too.
I can also see a direction where maybe we say, like, this survey, not maybe meeting folks' expectations. We want more curriculum-based measures, and we can look at filling that out, you know, with, you know, some of these other systems of oppression over time, and maybe accelerating our timeline in order to meet the board's needs sooner than later. And, you know, maybe there's a remonitoring opportunity to look at where we got to at the end of the school year before we come back for next school year, so that the board knows that there's things moving forward.
So I guess my thoughts on indicator 2, the evidence given, is no, not reasonable progress, not based on technicality, but based on evidence, because we ask for a curriculum assessment if the survey isn't necessarily tied to the results of some curriculum component. It feels like
arbitrary,
less meaningful.
Yeah.
So I think on that one, I'd like to see something closer to like what we do with the ELA, even though we can recognize that there's like room to improve on that one too. Maybe for our next discussion, when we look forward, there's an opportunity for additional indicators that show more of what's happening, more of those curriculum pieces.
And maybe change it to system of oppression instead of systems, because that begs more than one, and it's just one. So, like, my issue with it isn't just that I don't feel like the evidence is sufficient. I think that it doesn't show reasonable progress because of the way it's written.
Mm-hmm.
I do find myself wishing there was a way in what action is available to us that we can also value the engagement that Dr. Lahaki is having with, I think, like the right conversations and the organizations, our partners that work in these areas, and that we're trying to figure it out. And as Dr. Engel was saying, you know, building the model that hopefully other school districts can follow.
Yeah, I mean, we can say, so like the cover page of each monitoring report, the superintendent has a piece where, you know, you can say, these are the things, this is the context, this is the findings, and then the board has an option where we can include board commentary. So in the past, where we've acknowledged that like the results of the COVID, you know, pandemic and school closures and whatever impacted student achievement, we're like acknowledging that everything was really hard and it's still very hard. Although reasonable progress wasn't made, we acknowledge that like the good work is continuing, and so it's not like you get an F. Mm-hmm. It's like the effort was great, but we're still looking for something else as we explore what this should be. So if people have ideas for what they want to write in that little cover page, you can send them my way. But okay, I feel like we've had good discussion on this one, and I would like to move on to R3. Are there any other comments on this before we move on? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Dr. Lahaki, to R3. And maybe we won't focus so much on 3.6.
Right, yeah, it's always the timeline of this is a bit interesting, right? Because the way the timeline or the cycle goes, present 3.6 and then hop in right into R3, which includes 3.6, right? So that is interesting. You can see all the 6 results policies that the board has created for involved citizenship. And then our indicators throughout the year that we presented for each one, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, and 3.6. Up until this point, everything has been meets reasonable progress. And if you weren't on the board at the time of the presentation, that information is also linked in the report for review as well. Work in progress. So the next meeting is an opportunity to make changes to R3, whether it be indicators, other opportunities that you'll get a chance to provide some feedback on to see if it better matches what you're all looking for.
It is also an opportunity for if board members have a policy amendment recommendation on that, get that out the Thursday before the meeting so we can include it in the agenda if there's desire there.
My comment would be that the GC 6E could be adjusted so that R1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it starts in May when you have a new board versus always giving this report, and some of the board members, if there's been turnover, wasn't part of it. Might make sense to start with one when a board starts, like in May. So that would be my only thought to consider for some, I don't know if we can say it now or if we have to wait till we review 6E, so.
Make a note.
Yeah, I think the way we've tried to space out R2 and R3, those elements, is when the data is available. We don't want, ACT data to come out and then the board has to wait 6 months to get that. We know that the board will be responding to that in public maybe, and you would want access to that information in a timely fashion. Same thing with like school report cards and some of that other stuff. And so totally respect that as a strategy to ensure that the board has the full knowledge. If we did that with all of our policies, some of our months would be very busy,
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it kind of starts in January. It doesn't have to start with one. Again, I think as you are doing it when it makes sense to bring the data forward. But to start that cycle so that when R3 is reviewed in totality, that the whole board would have been seated during that time.
Makes sense.
Any questions on the remainder of R3? So like 1 through 5, since we just spent time on R6. So we will vote on this. So this is a good, not today, but at our next regular meeting. So this is a good opportunity if you need information to help solidify your decision on these, the evidence presented as being sufficient for the indicators that were previously approved. I'm seeing a head shake no, another no. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lepecki.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Our last information item is the first look at Operational Expectation Monitoring Report, OE7, Asset Protection. And I will turn it over to Dr. Engel, but I think we're going to
Quickly transition to Ms. Sprang, our subject matter expert on asset protection.
So, in respect of time, asset protection is all about our insurance policies and what we do within the district to protect our assets, whether that's our facilities, our funds, our human resources, information, and most of it is required by statute, so we are required to carry those insurance policies. Does anybody have any questions about it as you went through it? A little bit more cut and dry than our instructional OEs or results policies.
Especially once you get to the superintendent may not, we're trying to find evidence that we didn't do something, and so those are tough to quantify in like a document or something, and so those are often supported by statements of we received no reports of, so just that's why some of those look a little different than other sorts of OEs.
I just have a question, maybe this isn't something you can answer. Are our levels of coverage comparable with other districts of our size? with like the kinds of
We're
facilities?
required to have certain levels.
Okay.
So we
That's
yes.
the whole.
All right, I'm not hearing other questions, so I think we can move on. Thank you, Ms. Spring. We'll move on to announcements, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Berkedal.
I don't have any.
No announcements tonight, okay. I just have a brief one. The linkages have been scheduled, and there is a document with all of the dates and times you can sign up to participate. We'd like 3, maybe 2 people at each linkage. There are 2 that occur after 5, and the rest are in the traditional work day to allow our staff to come on during their work day. So, yeah.
Just quick, is there a reason we want no more than 3 people to attend?
No, absolutely
Okay.
more. We just don't want one person going solo because we don't. Yep, Ms. Steigerwald sent an email with an attachment with all the dates. If, everyone wants to come, we put a message out for each linkage, letting the public know that a quorum may be present, but no action is being taken. So we can all come. That would be a great thing to happen.
So how do you want to make sure that you have at least 3?
Put your name down, and then as the date comes up, we kind of reach out to see if anyone else can come, and then assess the situation if it requires a reschedule.
Ms. Steigerwald monitors the situation and twists some arms if need be.
All right, that's all I've got today. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Engel.
Just 2 things. First, the WASB Fall Region 6 workshop and regional meetings coming up on October 5th. So it's here this Thursday. So if you're interested, still an opportunity to sign up. I'll be there, and I believe Mr. Korberg as well. And then Governor Evers declared October 1st through 7th School Board Week. And I am incredibly appreciative of the school board members I work with now and have in the past. It's an incredibly valuable service to our community, and I'd just like to read the proclamation real quick. State of Wisconsin, Office of the Governor, proclamation. Whereas school boards are locally elected bodies that serve their communities with the mission of preparing students for success in higher education, future jobs and careers, and a productive engagement in their communities. And whereas school board members are elected to serve students, district employees, and the larger community, working closely with parents, taxpayers, educational professionals, and other community members to do what's best for kids. And whereas school boards are empowered and charged with overseeing the education of students enrolled in their district, as well as their district's employees, finances, operations, and facilities. And whereas school board service is an honor that carries a significant responsibility, and in moments of need, school board members often go beyond the call of duty. And whereas this week, the state of Wisconsin commends school boards across the state for the important role they play as advocates for public education and as essential partners in the state's efforts to ensure that every kid in Wisconsin has access to a high-quality public education. Now, therefore, I, Tony Evers, Governor of the state of Wisconsin, do hereby proclaim October 1st through 7th, 2023, as School Board Week throughout the state of Wisconsin, and I commend this observance to all our state's residents. I echo his sentiments entirely. It's a challenging job. It's a valuable job. There's no better job than serving our students in public education. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to agenda planning now.
I'll make a motion to approve the October 16th, 2023 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections.
Seconded.
Okay, with a motion by Mr. Korberg and a second by Dr. Sprague, we will approve the October 16th, 23 Board of Education agenda with any additions or corrections with a voice vote. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. I'll keep the board debriefing very brief tonight because I did not take detailed notes on what we did well and what we need to do to improve. I know that in that coherent governance book that we all spent a long time reading and highlighting and bookmarking, you probably noticed that like 50% of our discussion should be focused on students, and results policies are the most important piece that we track to like govern the district. I think tonight was good because we were very like student focused, and I think that's a good thing for tonight. I think something that we could do to improve is when we're having our discussions about like the task at hand. Like sometimes it can be hard when we are, assessing a monitoring report that's given us evidence and we're seeing indicators we don't like. And I do this too. Like it's hard to separate out like, is it okay for the indicators approved before and now this will be a future indicator change? And I think that's something just to be mindful. We can absolutely have the discussion as long as we're able to separate out what actions we're going to take on the discussion that happens. I'll open it up if anyone else has any other comments.
I wanted to say, I think you did an excellent job of clarifying those questions, at least for me, and making sure that like redirecting the conversation is necessary. So I appreciated that.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Okay. So we will go into closed session. So I have to read some content before we can do that. The La Crosse Board of Education will consider a motion to move into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session. To wit, review and evaluate proposals regarding the sale of Lincoln Middle School. Is there a motion to convene to closed session?
So moved.
Second.
So with a movement by Dr. Sprague and a second by Mr. Korberg, we'll do a roll call vote to move into it.
Ms. Bergdahl?
Yeah.
Aye. Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Korberg?
Aye.
Dr. Sprague?
Aye.
Ms. Sukla?
Aye, sorry.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye. All right, so we will move into closed session. Second floor?
Second floor,
Upstairs?
209.
209.
Yeah.
This week. Are we good to go? Are we still recording? Okay. So we need a motion to reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Okay, with a motion by Ms. Sukla and a second by Dr. Sprigg. We don't,
We have to do a roll call, don't we?
do we have to vote on that?
Just unless there's objection.
Okay. All right, then we will adjourn. Oh, I thought we didn't have to vote.
Wait, that was,
Wait,
that
you
was
still-
reconvening. Now we have to adjourn.
You still vote to
Okay.
reconvene, but you
Okay.
don't need a roll call.
Okay,
But you
gotcha.
can still do it.
I was like, okay, let's go. All those in favor in reconvening in open session, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we're back in open session. Now we can adjourn. Thank you, everybody.